first one, and you can decide other strategies going forward.
Okay.
I'm going to go upstairs. I love you.
Okay. So this is the book called Extra Yarn. It's written by Mac Barnett and illustrated by John Clausen. You might also notice that this book has a really beautiful little silver sticker on it. That silver sticker means that this book is a Caldecott Honors book, which means that it's a really special book and a lot of people like it, and it comes highly recommended. We've seen this sticker before when we read the book Kitten's First Full Moon, and you all noticed that there was a silver sticker on that one too. So this book has the same award. So the title of this book is Extra Yarn. Oh, I know we like to count how many times we see the title. So 1 on the spine, 2. Let's see if we find it on the end papers. No, here we just see a really nice shade of green and also my name. So that way, if I ever loan this book to somebody, they know who to return it to. And here's a brief description of the story. And it says, this looks like an ordinary box of ordinary yarn, but it turns out that it isn't. Ooh. I found the title again. So that's the third time. Number 3, Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett and illustrated by John Clausen. This book is dedicated to Stephen Malk and for Mom. Let's see, how can we see this the best? Try to be still. Maybe we can do it this way? No, then I can't read it. We'll figure this out together. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black of soot from chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. So she went home and she knit herself a sweater. And when Annabelle was done, she still had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars too. Look how cute Mars looks. But there was still extra yarn. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. I wonder what his dog's name is. Maybe Venus or Saturn. But it turned out he was. And even after she'd made a sweater for Nate and his dog and for herself and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet," shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone. Annabelle, that sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you." "Well, then I'll knit one for everyone," she said, "so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." But it turned out she could, and she did. And even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mom and dad, and for Mr. Pendleton and Mrs. Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Lewis. Oh, I just noticed she put a letter L there for Lewis on his sweater. How special. She made sweaters for everyone except for Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters or even long pants, and he would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat, and even then Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats and for other animals too. Soon, people thought, soon Annabelle will run out of yarn. But it turned out she didn't. So Annabelle made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Things began to change in that little town. What changes do you notice? News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from all around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabelle's hand. One day, an archduke, who was very fond of clothes, sailed across the sea, and he demanded to see Annabelle. "Little girl," said the Archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I'm willing to offer you $1,000,000. "No, thank you," said Annabelle, who was knitting a sweater for a pickup truck. The Archduke's mustache twitched. $2,000,000, he said. Annabelle shook her head. "No, thanks." $10,000,000, shouted the artichoke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave it," said Annabelle. "I won't sell the yarn." And she didn't. What do you think of that? How much money would it take for you to sell a magical box of yarn? Would you sell it? Why do you think Annabelle doesn't want to sell her yarn? Ooh, this page is very dark. So that night, the Archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house, and they stole the box, and they took it to the Archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea. How rotten. Back to his castle. The Archduke put on his favorite song, and he sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box, he lifted its lid, and he looked inside. I wonder what we're going to see. I wonder what he found. It's empty. His mustache quivered. It shivered and it trembled. The Archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, "Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse. You're never going to be happy again." I wonder why the Archduke is so unhappy. But here goes the little box, floating away at sea. Where do you think it will go? Look who found it. It turned out she was happy. And look at the tree that she's sitting in. The end. And this is the last end paper. What a great story. I hope that you all enjoyed this story. I know I really do. I like this story because I really like colorful things, and I like the idea of there being a magical box of yarn. I will send you some questions that you can think about. Maybe you can write some of your answers in your journal. Maybe you can talk about it with your parents. But I really hope you enjoyed the story, and I will keep adding more stories. Thanks.